Let's bring the focus back to your personal timeline. We veered off a bit, but these themes are deeply interconnected with our advocacy work. When you, I, and the other survivors traveled across Western capitals to brief international officials, we frequently ran into walls. Some individuals truly listened, while others remained completely oblivious. Frankly, it fills me with a sense of pity for them because they fail to grasp the danger heading their way. Let's return to the physical reality of captivity. We covered psychological warfare and starvation, but what about the direct physical abuse? At the start of our conversation, you mentioned moments where the brutality spiked to an 11 out of 10. Can you take us through a moment when things became genuinely critical, where it crossed into pure horror?
Pure horror occurred on several occasions, but a heavy baseline of cruelty was constant. The physical abuse was both highly systematic and completely unpredictable. It was systematic because a transfer to any new prison automatically guaranteed a brutal intake processing. The severity and duration of that initial beating depended entirely on the staff running the facility, the local culture, and what they wanted to extract from you. You have zero control over the outcome. Beyond that, the daily routine itself was a gauntlet. The morning and evening inspections were essentially opportunities for violence. It was a statistical certainty that during these roll calls, you would receive 5, 10, or 15 blows with clubs or boots, depending entirely on the mood of the shift. Furthermore, the specialized special forces units guarding the POW blocks rotated on a monthly basis. Whenever a fresh unit arrived, they spent the first couple of weeks treating us as a source of personal amusement. They would randomly open cell doors, drag prisoners into the corridor, force them into agonizing positions, and beat them relentlessly for 20 or 30 minutes before moving on to the next cell. That was their idea of recreation. And then there were the formal interrogations. For me, those were the absolute pinnacle of dread because they break you mentally. You are completely isolated inside a small concrete office with 2 or 3 interrogators, a special forces handler, sometimes a guard dog, and an array of compliance tools, industrial stun guns, heavy rubber batons, mallets, metal pipes, bare electrical wiring, water buckets, handcuffs, and hoods. These sessions never lasted for just 15 minutes. They went on for hours. My longest interrogation lasted for 6 consecutive hours. I have a close brother in arms from the Azov regiment, whose interrogation went on for 12 hours without a single interruption. The torturers would rotate out in shifts to rest, while he remained strapped to the chair the entire time. You cannot comprehend the toll of having multiple stun gun batteries completely drained into your body over that span of time, or the amount of permanent scar tissue it leaves behind. When they spotted my tricep tattoo, they used the industrial stun gun like a crude branding iron, holding the live current against the skin in an attempt to literally burn the symbol off my body. The pain was catastrophic, blinding, but a tattoo cannot be erased that way. A stun gun isn't a medical removal laser, it just destroys human tissue. They also utilized a device known as a tapik, a vintage military field telephone. They attach the raw copper wires directly to your skin and crank the generator to send high voltage shocks pulsing through you. It inflicts agonizing pain, and they attach those wires to every sensitive part of your body. Every part. They don't respect any boundaries. They also utilize a suffocation technique. I am describing methods that were directly inflicted on me personally. Other guys endured different variations, depending on the interrogator's imagination. They force a thick wet cloth over your face, shove a knee hard between your shoulder blades to pin you down, and pull the cloth taut while another guard pours water directly over your nose and mouth to induce immediate drowning. You are thrashing, suffocating, gasping for air, and all of this is executed while you are stripped completely naked, completely bare. You fall to the floor, they kick you until you stand back up, and then they begin making explicit threats of sexual violence, detailing exactly how they will abuse you or claiming they are about to throw you into a cell with violent Russian convicts who will finish you off. They routinely execute mock executions, holding a loaded pistol directly against your temple and pulling the trigger on an empty chamber. I learned later that international law has a specific term for this, the simulation of execution, which is strictly categorized as a severe war crime under the Geneva Convention.
Forcing a prisoner to remain naked during abuse is prohibited sexual violence under international law.
In those moments, you are just a broken body collapsing onto a freezing concrete or wooden floor. You have zero physical energy left, your body is covered in severe burns and hematomas. There isn't a single uninjured spot on your skin, yet the interrogation keeps going because they want to extract a specific confession. This doesn't stop after a few minutes, it goes on for hours on end, 6 hours in my case, 12 hours for my brother in arms. On top of that, they let the guard dogs bite you. I have a deep scar right here on my face. That is a literal chunk taken out of me by a guard dog they set on me.
That scar right near your eye, that's from a dog attack during an interrogation?
Yes, it was in Kursk.
It's a miracle it didn't take your eye out.
Yes, I got incredibly lucky. I survived many moments through sheer luck. They also used heavy wooden mallets, the kind meant for checking prison bars for structural defects, to strike our limbs. They used thick plastic plumbing pipes meant for hot water systems. Those pipes have incredibly dense walls, making them highly flexible and devastatingly impactful. They used them constantly. As I said, if you have any Ukrainian patriotic tattoos, that area of your body becomes a primary target for being beaten into a bloody, charred mess. That is the reality of the system in a nutshell.
I understand, and I hope our audience comprehends that when you summarize a horrific ordeal that spanned 2.5 or 3 years into a single podcast episode, compressing that timeline is incredibly difficult. We are highlighting the most intense turning points. But the crucial takeaway is that these weren't isolated incidents that occurred once or twice. This was the systematic daily routine of your existence.
It is absolute systematic regularity. It's an industrialized machine. Earlier, I mentioned 3 foundational pillars. Those pillars are chronic starvation, relentless physical pain, and total informational isolation. A complete vacuum. You are denied any knowledge of the outside world, stripped of context, left entirely alone with your thoughts, while being subjected to constant physical abuse and hunger. But there is a 4th pillar that binds the system together, with the information vacuum serving as its amplifier. Absolute terror. The system is designed to make you fear every single sound, even the rustle of your own clothing or the movement of your own shadow. You live in a state of absolute dread. You fear your cellmate making a sudden movement that might draw the guard's attention. You freeze at the sound of boots marching down the corridor or a noise outside the facility. You are forced to live in a state of primal fear 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Fear, hunger, and pain administered in a constant, uninterrupted loop. That is the definition of their system.
Yet, what strikes me most is that despite this calculated cruelty, the individuals who return home manage to successfully reintegrate, heal, and remain profoundly decent, rational human beings, infinitely more stable and human than the pathetic guards who tried to destroy them. The system forces compliance while you are trapped inside its walls because there is no escape. But the moment you step across the border, I see you guys stand tall and rebuild your lives. Let me ask you another question. Recently, we've seen reports of our long-range drones successfully striking targets deep inside Russia, specifically hitting military infrastructure near Taganrog and Novozebkov, towns where our personnel are confirmed to be held. My immediate thought was that our guys inside those cells must hear the detonations, given the proximity to the city centers. First, do you think that even within a total information vacuum, prisoners realize these explosions mean Ukraine is fighting back and striking deep into enemy territory, providing a massive morale boost? And second, do the guards retaliate by taking out their anger on the prisoners after their towns get hit?
Both of your points are absolutely accurate. When we were held in Kursk, we could clearly hear distant, heavy detonations. We initially assumed it was their air defense systems operating, but it forces you to analyze why is air defense active right over the city center of Kursk. It means it's targeting incoming assets. Hearing those explosions tells you everything. When we were stuck in Olenivka, the artillery fire was completely non-stop because the front line was incredibly close. In Olenivka, the guards would frequently force us out into the courtyard, lining us up in tight formations to use us explicitly as a human shield. They operated on the calculation that Ukrainian reconnaissance drones would spot our uniforms, recognize us as their own POWs, and hold fire to protect us. It was a routine tactic. The same reality applies to Kursk and Taganrog. You are trapped in a vacuum, but the human brain never stops analyzing. You piece things together. You catch a stray syllable whispered by a guard, or extract a detail from a newly captured soldier brought into the block. Sometimes during outdoor recreation periods for the regular Russian convicts, a guard would carelessly leave a radio broadcasting nearby, and you'd catch a snippet of news about intense fighting over a specific village in the Donetsk region. If you know the geography of the Donbass from previous deployments, you realize that if they are still grinding over that same small village after months of fighting, it means their grand offensive has stalled and they haven't conquered the region. You run those calculations internally. When you hear heavy explosions rock the city center, and it happens regularly, you know with absolute absolute certainty that Ukraine is launching powerful strategic strikes, it proves our country possesses the capability, the technology, and the iron will to bring the war to the aggressor. It is an incredible source of motivation. I know many guys who survived on that alone. For example, I was already out by the time the Kursk operation took place. I learned about it later, but the guys who were still inside when the offensive kicked off realized what was happening simply by listening to the sheer panic in the voices of the guards echoing down the corridor. It gave them a massive psychological surge, profound will to endure, because it proved our army was crushing their lines, and that completely transforms your mental state. The flip side of that reality is immediate retaliation. Whenever the Russian military suffers a massive defeat on the front, like during the Kharkiv counteroffensive, the liberation of Kherson, or when a Russian battalion got completely encircled and decimated in late 2022, the prison operatives would find out, march down our corridor, drag us out of our cells, and beat us half to death. It was pure retaliatory violence. They would scream, "Your people are slaughtering our boys out there." You try to say, "Officer, I've been locked in this concrete box for a year. I have nothing to do with that operation." But they don't care. They just need a target to vent their rage and humiliation on. They beat you savagely. We actually developed a dark joke about it in our cell. If a week began with the guards beating us with far more viciousness and frenzy than usual, we would look at each other and smile hard through the pain, saying, "Man, our guys must be absolutely crushing them on the front right now. The Russians are taking a massive beating out there."
That thought must make the physical pain somewhat easier to bear.
Psychologically, yes, it makes it incredibly bearable. You stand there listening to the first cell down the row, erupting in screams and groans as the guards move in, and you mentally prepare yourself. I would tell the guys, "All right, brothers, we run out, take our 10 or 20 heavy strikes, keep our heads covered, and crawl back inside. Just take the hits, it'll pass. You sprint out, take the beating, drag yourself back onto the floor, and yes, your body is broken and bleeding, but internally you are celebrating because you know your country is winning on the battlefield."
In the end, from your point of view, what is the definitive conclusion to this war that benefits the entire civilized world? How must this end for humanity to win?
For the entire world? Without a doubt, the complete dissolution of the Russian Federation into a multitude of small, independent, sovereign states and republics. Let them compete, balkanize, and fight among themselves if they must. A fractured, dismantled Russia, stripped of its imperial machinery, is the only guarantee of global safety. The world needs to dismantle their capacity to launch imperialistic wars of expansion, to halt their cycle of slaughter, rape, and pillage. The entire global community will benefit immensely, economically, resource-wise, and above all in terms of strategic security. Today, Russia represents the single greatest threat to human civilization. Why the greatest? Because beneath their deep-seated homicidal delusions, which are a matter for clinical psychiatry, they possess a massive global nuclear arsenal. That is the tragic reality.
They hold a massive nuclear stockpile, but those teeth must be extracted. Thank you, Yulian, for sharing this truth. A full reckoning will come. Despite anxious media narratives about frozen front lines and further invasions into Europe, we won't let it happen. If they dare, the civilized world will shatter that empire forever. Let me remind our audience, my guest today was Yulii Pylypei, a Marine who survived 2.5 years of lawless Russian captivity. The True War Crime Podcast continues its work. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you in the next episode.